Welcome to another tech video you didn't know you needed. Today we'll be taking a look at the Asus ROG Ally. I've been testing it like crazy for the past week and have a few thoughts and opinions to share, and how it's better in some ways and worse than others as compared to the Steam Deck. But the main question I wanted to answer is, does the Ally sleep? I don't know about you, but when I game on a Windows desktop or laptop, I always exit the game completely before sleeping the computer. That is obviously not how we expect a handheld to behave. I'll be testing over 30 games from different launchers on internal NVMe SSD, microSD card, AAA to indie, and emulation. So let's find out how that whole experience is like. So the first Ally I got was Defective, but sort of in a subtle way. It would consistently crash in Destiny 2 with broccoli errors even while sitting in orbit. This was on a clean install on a 2TB NVMe through Asus Cloud Recovery. All updates applied on latest BIOS and Destiny 2 local files verified. It seemed to happen more frequently when APU wattage boosted over 30 watts. I didn't have this issue in the other 30 games I tested, only in Destiny, but Destiny is my main game, so this wasn't acceptable. But thanks to a Redditor named Pharaoh who had the same issue and ended up exchanging his Ally, which finally fixed things for him. So I did the same, and my second Ally is running great, and Destiny 2 is now stable over hours of testing. So just so you know, it might be rare, but there are some marginal APUs out there that might need an exchange. So let's talk about ergonomics. I feel like the gold standard, my favorite controller is probably the Xbox controller. I like the deep grips and the long extensions on each side. You have really a lot of support, and I could play comfortably on this for hours without issues. Next, we can take a look at the original launch switch with the original Joy-Cons. Well, it's pretty light, but there's zero grips at all, and my hands will cramp after about 30 minutes, maybe to an hour play, so very uncomfortable. So you can see it's pretty shallow. Here we have nice grips. Here, take a look at the OLED switch with the Benbach. I did a full review on these if you're interested. I find this very comfortable, almost as comfortable as the Xbox controller. The grips are nice and deep, so you got a lot of support, very comfortable. Wish they were maybe a little longer, but I mean, for the form factor, I think it's a really good shape and compromise. Next, we have the Steam Deck, which also did a really good job, I felt. As far as for its form factor, you got pretty deep grips, really comfortable for me. I can play with this for hours without problems. And if you look where your thumbs rest on the analog sticks, if you think about first-person shooters, most of the time you're aiming with the right analog stick, so it's very important for that to be a very natural position. And you're mainly using the triggers and bumpers for shooting and secondary functions, and your face buttons are used less. So I like the priority being the right analog thumbstick as far as how it's shaped and where your thumb naturally rests. So take note of that, and we're going to jump over to the Ally, which I like almost the least, or as bad as the original Switch. So as you can see, there's almost no grip, there's no depth here at all. It's pretty much almost flat with just a little bit of a raise. It's very angular. I don't really like these corners that much. That part doesn't bother me as much as the shallow grips. And then look where your thumb naturally sits because of the way the shape of the grips are. They're kind of like resting here where there's nothing really. I mean, really the priority seems to be the face buttons. And then how are you supposed to reach the analog stick on the right for aiming in first-person shooters like in Destiny? Well, you kind of can't. You have to awkwardly push down, but then you don't really have support of anything on the grip. Or you just end up doing this and using the middle of your thumb, which is really unnatural. The whole thing feels absolutely horrible, I think. For other types of games like Diablo 4, where you're not really using the right analog stick, it's fine, it's mostly fine. But if I'm using this and I'm like lying on the couch and I'm lifting this above the ground in the air, then this is horrible. It's almost unusable in my opinion. And really, I need somebody to make third-party grips or something, and I will buy those immediately. Now, if you're resting it on table or on your lap or something like that, it's not as bad because then you kind of have the weight taken off and you can move your hand a little bit closer down to kind of use the analog stick more appropriately. Other than that, I think this is probably the thing I hate about the most about the Ally is the positioning of the analog stick combined with the shape of the shallow grips. It's just awful. So the first thing you should do when you get your Ally is to make sure you boot it up and make sure everything works fine. You should update everything, including the BIOS, my Asus updates, the updates from within the Armory crate. Just do it all, and then test a game or two, maybe like Destiny 2, to make sure your APU is stable. Anyways, once you make sure everything is good, then first thing I did was shut it down and replace the SSD NVMe drive with a 2TB one. So I'm not a big fan of the official case, but there is one very useful thing that you can do with it when you're doing your swap and opening up the Ally. I like to use the case to hold the device, so that way the sticks are in these grooves in the case, and that way when you're applying pressure to remove the screws, you don't risk damaging your analog thumbsticks. But that's about the best part about this case. Other than that, it's pretty flimsy and overpriced. So the initial setup experience is quite painful and tedious compared to the Steam Deck. Updating everything and having to go to 3 different places, Armory Crate, my Asus, and Windows Updates, was a bit annoying. You also had to reboot several times and recheck for updates just to make sure everything was up to date. And if you decided to swap the SSD and install from the cloud recovery option in the BIOS, it can take several hours, even on Ethernet. On top of that, you would have to reset your pen a few times and relearn your fingerprint because Windows wonkiness reasons. So one of the first things you should do is check your device encryption setting. For some reason, this was on for me, and it has no business being on. Why would you use BitLocker or whatever to encrypt your entire drive on a handheld gaming system? It's not like you're storing corporate secrets or something on here. It should definitely be off. It's just overhead you don't need, so you just make sure you go to your settings, Windows settings, privacy and security, device encryption, just toggle that off. It's going to take probably a couple of hours or maybe just an hour depending on how full your drive is, but make sure you turn that off. The next thing I would do is go to my Asus customization and turn on battery care mode. I like this because it prevents your battery from charging more than 80%, which is great because it's going to prolong your battery life and prevent swelling and all that. I have this turned on all my laptops. I really like this feature. And then you have this instant full charge mode when you're about to travel or something, then you can boost it up to 100% during those times. One problem is every time you plug in a power source, it's going to prompt you with a notification, pull you out of your game, and it's really annoying. So make sure you go to notifications in Windows settings. Scroll down to my Asus and make sure you toggle that off. So the Ally supports something called Modern Standby, which I guess is different from what I'm used to, which is S3. I'll put a link to the Microsoft article if you want to read more about it, but it doesn't matter because I guess Modern Standby equals broken and doesn't actually work, at least in my case, and I can show you in a little bit what it does. But I'll show you how I have it set up. So basically all the games I'm going to be testing are going to be using the Hibernate mode, except for the one case where I got it to actually work in standby, but that was very rare. It only happened like twice, and then it never worked again. So this is how I have my power options set up. And then if you come over here to choose what the power buttons do, this is under control panel. I have everything set to Hibernate. Also, I have Hibernate enabled in the menu, in the start menu. Here I am trying to get regular standby to work, and as you can see, it immediately goes to the lock screen, which basically means something is immediately waking it back up. I've tried Power Config last week. I've went through the entire device manager, looking at every device, trying to disable any device or uncheck any device that has the ability to wake the machine. So I ticked off all those boxes, and I still can't figure it out. Whatever you do, do not go to the command center. Click on the little flower icon and click sleep. That completely breaks everything for me. Basically, the screen goes dark and it just keeps flickering and flashing, and then I just have to hold down the power button and completely shut the machine off. So I've done that twice. Do not do it. Maybe it works for you. Definitely does not work on my machine. The Hibernate, Restart, and Shutdown do work fine from Command Center though. I also highly recommend you make this lighting adjustment under Settings. You want to go down to Settings under Lighting, and then make sure under Sleep you turn that off. Otherwise, this thing just keeps blinking at you even when it's asleep, which seems silly. So yeah, turn that off. So before we actually get into game testing, we're going to need to get a baseline to see how long it takes to hibernate and resume when there's nothing actually running. That's because how much RAM is being used actually impacts the amount of time it takes to save to disk and restore. It looks like it takes about 15 seconds to hibernate and resume. So let's get into some actual game testing. This is the only game that actually worked for me in standby. As you can see, it shuts off almost immediately, but takes about 7 seconds to get down to about 7 watts and about 49 seconds to get to 0. So it does take a while before it stops bleeding out power, but resuming takes only like a couple of seconds, so it's almost instantaneous. Pretty nice if it works, but I don't trust it. I think it'd wake up potentially or sap a lot of battery power when you don't realize it, so we're going to test with Hibernate for the rest of the games. And here's the Steam Deck for comparison. Takes about 6 seconds to fully sleep to 0 watts, and then about 2 seconds to wake up. And here's the Ally on Hibernate mode. As you can see, it takes about 25 seconds to both hibernate and also to resume. That's because it has to take all the contents of RAM and dump it to disk and then read it back into RAM. Now I'm going to run through the rest of the games really quickly. I'm only going to slow down if there are issues. If you don't care about any of that, just jump to the end of the section for a summary table. So after resume, it seemed to have come back in windowed mode. To fix this, go into settings, change from full screen to borderless, and that seems to fix it for good. I did retest and confirm it was still fixed.
Between us and those whack jobs. Nice to see you. Listening for a change. You do not see. Listen. Don't you start with me, muscles. You're still mostly in my good books.
To figure out who's boarding us is the observation deck, 4 floors up.
Could it be a rescue team?
Wouldn't bet on it.
Listen, bring me up close to your face. You can aim better. Perfect, perfect. Now just look down the sights and fire. You're doing great, by the way. Hey, oh, I'm proud of you. You need some more encouragement? You're, that's my little G3 killer. Oh, look at you, G3 killer.
General Cabrani.
I hear you've been tricking out your wheels. That tells me you're serious about this.
Wouldn't be here if I wasn't.
You know, if you want to get in the league, you're not getting there alone.
From what I hear, neither are you.
That's what I wanted to talk about. I'm thinking we can help each other. Form a crew. Unless you got any better offers on the table.
Plenty, actually.
Bullshit. Come on. What do you say?
I say you're on.
All right. Okay. If we're gonna climb the ladder to the league, we gotta get ourselves a race against another crew. Remember Kenny?
That redneck from my first night here?
His crew, the Speed Boys, are ripe for taking down.
Forgive me if I don't want to have a chat with a guy who tried to possess me.
Fair enough.
What are you, anyway?
You first, then I'll fill you in. Still, this town's in rough shape. Never thought it'd get this bad.
Now let's take a look at hibernation over a long period of time. So the first example is God of War hibernating for 5 hours. It looks like it lost about 2% power. The next test is over 7 hours, but just nothing running, and that seems to lose about 1%. So here's a summary of all the games tested. The results were a bit better than expected. Ally, or I should say Windows, gets a solid B. You can expect anywhere from 15 to 25 seconds to hibernate and another 15 to 25 seconds to resume. Expect to lose a couple of % of battery power overnight. A few games had sound issues after waking, and it's a shame Forza Horizon 5 just doesn't work after sleeping. I tested it twice, though it works great on the Steam Deck. Now, if Microsoft and Asus can get modern standby to work properly and consistently, then things will be in a pretty good spot. 15 to 25 seconds isn't the end of the world, but 2 to 4 seconds is a whole lot better. So let's go over a few important accessories. First of all is this RII portable keyboard. The older one that I got had a micro USB, but this new one has USB-C, so it's a little bit potluck if you'll get the USB-C one, but I use this all the time. I think it's indispensable, especially in Windows. This power bank is an incredible value. It's 20,000 mAh. It does do 100 watts. I can confirm that. And it runs only $35, so it's a lot cheaper than the other brands. This case, I've already made my thoughts known, but I feel it's kind of flimsy and overpriced and not really worth it. And then let's talk about the docks. Okay, so I've tested these out now. The two I'm going to look at is the JSOX one. This is the one without the SSD, but this is the one with the gigabit Ethernet and USB 3. And the official Steam Deck dock, which you have to then add the adapter for JSOX. It's really designed so you can use your Steam Deck in a case and the official dock, but it also works great with the Ally. Without it, it will not fit, so you definitely need this adapter. Basically, the official one with the adapter, I think is the best because it will pull a full 30 watts if you put a 100-watt power supply. Like this neck tech, which I really like. So I use this with this, and you get a full 30 watts. With the JSOX, no matter what I did, and I tried it with the power bank, I tried it with this PD charger, and I never had pulled more than 25 watts. So just keep that in mind. One last thing, I did get this neat little cover over the USB-C and the expansion port, and it was only a few bucks shipped, and it fits nice and flush. One accessory I forgot about is a good car charger. So I had one in my car, but it was just a regular old phone charger, and it's not going to put out the wattage you need for like a handheld gaming system. And on a recent pretty long car trip, I kind of really missed having one. So I bought this U-Green one for about $32, and it will do like 100 watts in the top USB-C port. And then you still have another USB-C and a regular USB-A, and it'll split the power if you use those two. But this should power your Ally just fine on long car trips. So don't forget to pick up one of these. The last thing I want to talk about is micro SD cards. Yes, we know there's a bit of drama going around the Ally right now, and I'll explain what happened to me. I bought the cheap $67 silicon power ones. I actually bought one several weeks ago and used it with my Steam Deck. I kept getting write errors. It was very disappointing. I returned it. Thought I'd give it one more chance. Bought another one for the Ally. Kind of worked for a while. The read speeds were pretty good, but the write speeds were abysmal. They were dropping down to like 6 megabytes per second, and then it's just started basically failing. Now, I've always used SanDisk before, so I went back to using SanDisk. Now I'm using this Ultra one, and it was for my Steam Deck, but I took it, reformatted it for NTFS for my Ally, and it's been working great. I'm getting full read and write speeds around 70 to 90 megabytes per second. Hopefully it doesn't burn up or break. For those of you who are interested, here's some quick shots of the BIOS screens, CPU-Z and GPU-Z. Here's a quick test showing the Ally docked to an official Steam Deck dock, streaming from a local server using Steam Streaming, and an Xbox One controller over Bluetooth. So, some final thoughts while I show off some Destiny 2 gameplay. I used the ROG recommended settings from their blog article. I'll have a link in the description. Things I really like. Number 1, hands down, is performance. The Z1 Extreme is rather incredible. It has CPU performance that matches modern desktop CPUs, and RDNA 3 is no slouch either. I just kind of wish it had 32 gigabytes of RAM. I wouldn't have minded paying an extra $100 to double the RAM. Hitting 60 FPS in almost anything is now possible. Sure, you have to sacrifice resolution or crank up FSR or turn down some settings, but I think it is worth the trade-off for that smooth 60 FPS, especially on a 7-inch screen. Number 2 is that display. 48 to 120 Hz VRR with LFC, low frame rate compensation, kicking in when FPS dips below 48. It's a game changer, and it's very hard to go back once you've experienced this on a handheld. Number 3, it runs Destiny 2. Okay, I mean it runs Windows, and therefore it runs almost anything. I love how easy it is to open it up and swap the SSD. And 2TB 2230 NVMe SSDs are only $150 now. And emulation is amazing. Enough said. Things to improve. Number 1 thing I dislike about the Ally is the ergonomics and the grips. I know it is a very personal subjective thing, but the shape just doesn't work for me, at least in first-person shooters. I think the Steam Deck absolutely nailed it in this area. I really hope some third-party grips get made. The reason I came across so critical is this is the main thing that stood between me really impressed with the Ally and me loving the Ally. It runs Windows. I had all sorts of odd quirks, and much more so than a typical Windows desktop or laptop while making this video. I probably had to reboot 10 times. I've had the controls stop working once when a reboot didn't fix it, but I still had to shut down, unplug, wait a while, then boot up. Same with the command center coming up mostly blank. Hibernate works for the most part, but I miss the speed and consistency of sleep on the Steam Deck. There is definitely room for improvement here. I'm a little worried about the micro SD card. So far the SanDisk Ultra is performing well. I hope it continues to do so. The real cost of the Ally is more like $700 plus $40 for the crappy case for a total of $740 if you want to compare it to the top-end Steam Deck, which is only $650 and comes with a very nice case. That's now a $90 difference. And if you really want to save some money, buy the lowest end one for $400, drop in a 2TB SSD into it for a total of $550. A 2TB Ally would be $850. Now that comes out to a $300 difference. So what do I recommend? Hands down, the Steam Deck is the better value. If you aren't a big Destiny 2 player, then the decision becomes pretty hard. For me, no Destiny 2 on Steam Deck without booting into Windows, which isn't a great experience, is a big issue for me. I absolutely love the boost in performance of the Ally, and I personally think it's worth it. But that's me, someone who puts a lot of value in raw compute. The Steam Deck had its fair share of issues at launch, and so does the Ally. The question is, how well is Asus going to support this device? Valve has and is doing an excellent job with the Steam Deck updates and improvements and a very nice pace. I only hope Asus can come close to that level of support. One big advantage Valve has is they are in full control of their entire stack from OS to hardware, while Asus won't be able to fix some things without Microsoft's involvement with Windows. I have jury duty in a couple of days, and I've decided I would bring the Ally along with a power bank, so I guess that answers the question. Well, I hope you found this video informative. Going forward, this channel will be only tech and gaming related. I'll start another channel for all my other life-related stuff like piano. I don't post on a regular schedule. Instead, I usually start with a question I want answered that I couldn't adequately find an answer to in other videos, and I just take you along for the ride. This space is very crowded. I hope my videos make a nice supplemental video to those from the bigger channels, which I also love to watch. If you like this style of content, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.